Good evening. My name is Michael Joyce. I'm a registered professional engineer with Milona McBroom. With me tonight is also Jennifer Martz from Milona McBroom. She's here together with us, and we're here on behalf of the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. And with the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments is Mark Nielsen, the planner. Milona McBroom was hired by Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments to continue and refine an earlier study that was started back in 1991 by another engineering firm to study corridor and spot improvements along Route 67. Now, our focus of our project was limited to the distance between the Clarity's Village Shopping Center and the Naugatuck River, and they're just shy of the bridge itself. This task that we were hired to perform was called a preliminary engineering study. This is an early due diligence phase to identify spot improvements that could be performed in the corridor, identify restrictions, constraints, go through some design alternatives, vet out some alternates that were prepared. And in that process, we produced a report. We have copies up here for people if they wish to look at it, for spot improvements. It goes through the traffic analysis we did. It goes through the engineering analysis we did. Again, preliminary basis. We haven't identified all impacts. We haven't identified all construction costs. We've done some budgetary numbers for that work. But one of the major components of this preliminary engineering stage is to conduct a public outreach and public involvement process. Now, through working with the town and given the difference of residents and businesses that are in the corridor, and not only in the corridor but just outside this particular project area, it was decided that a more targeted invitation would be sent out to project stakeholders, as we call them, and you are the invitees of that process. So we've had one meeting so far this week on Tuesday night. About 20 people were able to show up for that particular meeting from the neighborhoods. And again, tonight, this is a precursor to a more formal public information meeting, which will be held on Monday evening. I believe you've received notification of that as well in the invitations that were sent out. It's also been publicly noticed in the paper. If you didn't, we can give more details regarding that. It'll be held back in this same room again on Monday evening. Just to go quickly through the corridor, I know you're very familiar with this project area. We'll go through it. We're not going to assume we know this area better than you, but for the purpose of this presentation, let's just walk through it again and refresh our memories a little bit. Behind me here is a few graphics which we'll get to in a little more detail. This is, again, the project limits from Clarity's Village all the way over to the Naugatuck River on the right. We do have some limits. We've focused in on some of the areas between the new Walgreens improvements that were performed recently and Old Drive East between here and River Street, and then also some extensions of some improvements on River Street which help support the improvements that are necessary on Route 67. And again, we'll get into that in a little bit more detail briefly. I intend tonight to go through some of these larger improvements a little more briefly to give your time to ask questions about your specific areas as we move forward, and we can get into more detail once we get into that question and answer period. So again, our project area starts from the Naugatuck River Bridge. This is looking west up toward Oxford. We have our intersections, two state roads, Route 67 and State Route 313, which is River Street. You can see the different islands and configurations, crosswalks, etc., parking. This picture is obviously a little bit old. Some of these buildings have been knocked down since. As we work our way up the corridor, we start to identify the existing conditions. We've got on-street parking in front of the businesses on the corner of Franklin and Bank Street. We have certain parking areas that are accessible off of Bank Street as well. And you can start to see also the condition of the sidewalks in the area. And as part of this project, not only were we looking at the roadway improvements and traffic signalization improvements, but we also took a look at pedestrian circulation in and out of this corridor. The reason for that is obviously we're trying to get people in the neighborhoods in the area to also have access to the downtown area. The town is investing in some recreational opportunities in that area, some of which have been constructed with the Tingyu Dam Park. The other area is in their design right now and hopefully going to go to construction in the spring, would be the extension of a greenway trail from the Tingyu Dam Park up along the toe of Route 8 up to Bank Street on the other side of the Naugatuck River Bridge. Again, making a connection for, while there's a pedestrian connection that takes you to downtown you do have to traverse under Route 8 across the ramps and across Wakely Avenue. So it's not the Wakely Street. It's not the most inviting pedestrian route to get to the downtown area, unless you're going to the areas that are further up 67. Again, continuing up, you can see some of the constraints we have in the corridor regarding pedestrian accessibility. Narrow sidewalks don't really support ADA or handicap accessible activity on the corridor. We've got steep slopes. There's an existing retaining wall in front of the building over here. Historic property that we'll have to be careful of as we do our improvements, and we'll talk about how we've balanced our design associated with that. You're familiar with some of the more recent improvements that have occurred during the course of this study as this study was performed. Walgreens was constructed, new signalization improvements were made at the intersection. As we go forward with our presentation, you'll see how we're going to advance in addition to those improvements and enhance some of those improvements that were already made. Challenges along the southern side of Route 67. Existing residences, existing businesses that either use brief 10-minute parking areas, parking up on sidewalks. As you can tell, there's not a lot of distance between the edge of pavement and the current porches and steps that walk right out onto the sidewalk there. Creates a severe constraint for us when it comes to how we construct and improve this road for traffic circulation, and then also maintain access to residential properties. As we work our way back down toward Bank Street and River Street, we see the existing lane arrangements that are here. As we get into the conceptual alternatives, we'll explain how we're going to look to modify and improve those to improve some of the current problems that happen with cars that tend to queue up on River Street and then cause delays for people trying to get to Route 67. So in brief, this is also the same as this particular rendering here. In this particular graphic, in gray is roughly the same limits of the existing pavement area. In yellow are some of the new widened areas. So this project doesn't propose a lot of physical widening of Route 67. It's more an improvement of the efficiency of the lanes and how they're constructed. As you currently travel west on Route 67 up to this area, you're all familiar with the race to first place that occurs before you get to Martha Street. There's a big battle to get who's there. A lot of near misses, a lot of rear-end collisions, a lot of side swipes that happen in the area. As far as accident studies go and accident reports, that's the primary area of problems as far as accidents. We also understand there's a lot of near misses on the corridor that aren't reported necessarily, but when it comes to those that are actually reported and actually have physical contact, the bulk of those happen in this race to be first going up to the west side of on Route 67. As you can see, what we're proposing to do is to streamline this area through here, extend actually 2 lanes all the way through and dovetail off the right turn lane that is now proposed and now exists for Walgreens, and then extend an additional right turn lane to Old Drive East. So if we go back a couple photos, Jennifer, to where the Walgreens improvements were. You'll notice that as you come up through here, this lane stops, and then the edge of pavement for Old Drive is here. So the vehicles who are kind of still jockeying for position up through here still have to neck down and get into this lane here. If you've got a vehicle that wants to go to Old Drive, they have to squeeze back over and then cut back over to the right to make their turn. We're proposing to continue a right turn lane, exclusive right turn lane for that work to take people who want to stay in that right side and go forward. They'll be able to stay in this lane and be able to go through the intersection to take that right turn onto Old Drive. Back to the graphic. Gentleman's here from the property on the corner here. As part of this project, we are proposing to eliminate the 2 parking spaces that are in front of the business on the corner there. We understand that those are high-end parking spaces for those particular businesses in the area, and we understand that's a discussion that's going to be held with the property owners as we get into design on how that impacts access to the buildings. Is there other areas to provide more parking for those businesses? They can still provide the efficiency. It's a very difficult location for cars to pull in and out of during rush hour traffic. The time of day that those parking spaces will be used will be important to know. Again, that's why we're having these stakeholder meetings, to understand the use of those parking spaces in that area a little bit better, so we can then either make accommodations to figure out how to replace that in some way, or discuss where other areas of parking might be able to be achieved. It's part of the project, and it's part of one of DOT's initiatives. They are encouraging projects to incorporate at a minimum a 5-foot shoulder off of the travel lane. That 5-foot shoulder supports bike activity through corridors, again, between the retail and some of the residential properties to the north and the recreational destinations to the east. The importance of providing that physical connection for on-street bicycle activity is an important component to the project. And in orange on here, which is not on the screen, the orange represents the improved sidewalks that would occur within the corridor. In addition to the physical and traffic signalization improvements that we're proposing, there are also some opportunities to consider some enhancements to the corridor, some aesthetic enhancements to the corridor. On the corner of River Street and Route 67, there's a very, very broad radius that turns here, much larger than is necessary to accommodate the types of vehicles and trucks that come through the corridor. We see this as an opportunity to create more of a controlled intersection. It's a very wide intersection. And an opportunity is to create more of a gateway entrance here, maybe a parklet area, again, to receive, hopefully, the beginning of this recreational area and set the standard for what's happening from there back toward downtown. This edge right here where the sidewalk is about where the existing edge of pavement is today. So there's an opportunity, whether it's through some, not your standard sidewalks, maybe some stamped concrete, that kind of thing, to enhance. It's not your main street, but it serves as your main street in a lot of ways in the downtown corridor. So we don't want to forget that this is where you live, this is where people work. You want to invite people, especially if there's retail establishments that are going to be preserved. This is an area that people want to come to and be pedestrians in. No, there will be. There's still going to be 3 lanes in there. Yep. And I'm going to get into exactly what we're doing about that area next. So as we get into, not so much is going to change on the Franklin Street approach. That's going to be pretty similar. A lot of that area is pretty much set. Not too much. Yeah. So, and again, we've modified, in this rendering shows a larger sidewalk area in front of the businesses on the corner, where there currently is parallel parking spots that currently exist. Next slide. So, River Street. One of the things we identified during the traffic analysis for this area was that River Street has, and this was backed up by some of our residents who were here on Tuesday night as well, I say a lot of people, a lot of trucks even, are using West Street to cut around Route 67, around River Street, and get over to the other intersection. Part of the reason for that is that this left turn queue, the backup of traffic on that starves people from getting into the other lane. So even the through movement going through here starves people from getting into that lane so they can get the turn efficiently. We're proposing to extend that left turn lane, which would then prevent the blocking of the other movements of vehicles that would come to the intersection. Right now, this pinch point happens just about where the bridge is, Little River Bridge is, on the southern side of that bridge. We're proposing to extend that back. It's going to require a little bit of widening and some retaining wall work back in here. As you can imagine, we can't do a lot of widening, little or all widening on the eastern side of River Street, given the steep bank associated with the Naugatuck River. Anecdotally, some of the information, I believe West Street's posted for no trucks, but I believe they'd use that anyway. I think some of the delay that occurs at this intersection is tied to the inefficiency of that left turn movement that currently exists. What we found through the corridor is that there's some timing inconsistencies with the signals themselves. Some of the intersections are coordinated, some of them are not. As part of this effort, there will be an investigation of those different improvements, signalization improvements along the corridor. A question was asked on Tuesday night, is what are you doing as far as looking into the future? What we do while our project area is limited to between the river and to Clarity's Village, our task is to look beyond the corridor to identify the land uses that are in the area and how that traffic growth could be projected to the future. So in our report, we've identified 2031, year 2031, as as the projected future volume, so that any improvements that would be recommended in this study and implemented would be or not looked at with blinders on for today. They're looked at in the future. They're looked at with an understanding that there is going to be growth. You can see a lot of commercial and development areas to the west of this particular project area that we have to be conscious of. Okay. Another intersection that we talked in great detail on about Tuesday night was the intersection of Church and Beecher Street. Today they come down. Church Street's a very steep road, two-way traffic that comes down to the intersection. The two roads plus Bank Street all kind of merge together at one location. Currently, right now, Beecher Street is one way up, and what we've proposed, and we've looked at a few different alternates. In each of these alternates, while they're not in your handouts, both alternates for Franklin, alternates for this location and some other locations, they are in the study here. We can go into those in more detail, but the preferred alternates is what you see in your handout. The preferred alternate for this location would be to let Beecher Street be the dominant intersection and have Church Street intersect with it. We also looked at bringing Church Street down itself to tie into Bank Street and let that be the dominant intersection with Beecher Street tying into it. There's topographic issues, there's elevation issues. Church Street is already very steep. To make that physical connection between there and there would create an unsafe landing or safety condition for that intersection. Just another view of the intersection itself. Again, you know this area better than we do. When it comes to the existing issues, you see it during times when we don't see it and when the traffic counts are not being performed. Next slide, please. All right, so this is currently the preferred alternate. Again, keep in mind, we're in a preliminary engineering stage. This is not a full design. What we did vet out what some of the issues might be. As part of this improvement, too, and while it's not shown in this graphic, there's a need for a left turn and a right turn coming out of this intersection. Right now, anybody turning left out of this area tends to stop anybody who wants to take that right that comes out of the Church Street intersection. By sliding the intersection between the two streets up, we have the ability to create a little flatter landing for Church Street so that people can come down at a little bit better grade than they currently do straight down into the hill, and then allow this traffic movement. So this balance of Beecher here would be a two-way configuration where vehicles would be able to come in here, vehicles would stop and work into two lanes, the left or right. Now, we understand this left-hand turn movement is still a very difficult movement. It's not signalized. The improvements that were done at Old Drive West, tied to the Walgreens, still it's a difficult left under most conditions, but which is why that extra right turn lane for the right turning vehicles is important. We feel that a lot of the vehicles who do go to the west in that area probably stay up on West Street and continue their way up to the next intersection and use that intersection. So the ability to leave a right turn lane open, dedicated for that movement, is important for those who do use Church Street to get onto 67 to that location. This is just a brief photo simulation of what this intersection may look like from across the street from Beecher. This is the current condition that's here today, and this would be the revised condition. Again, it's a photo simulation, artistic rendering of what it could look like in the future that identifies where the intersection would be. We had a lengthy discussion on Tuesday night with members from the Russian Club. There's some still discussions that will go into that. They've offered some comments for the record for some of their concerns in that area, possibly some more this evening. We'll be happy to hear those. And again, that's why we're here tonight. You know, this is a preliminary engineering phase. We're here to gain your input so that we can get these recommendations into the final report as this moves forward toward funding. Again, we've just done some possible conceptual renderings of what this area could look like. Again, keeping in mind that there's we'd like to make sure that this looks like a Seymour road and not necessarily always a DOT facility. We want to make sure there's an enhancement, if possible, within these corridors. The next intersection we looked at is the just to the east of the signalized intersection of Clarities. In this photo here, you'll see both the unsignalized entrance and exit near McDonald's for the Village Plaza. You see the one-way, steep, skewed angle approach from Johnson Avenue that comes down to Route 67. And again, this is what you see as you look down, coming down. Very difficult left turn movement there. While not a lot of volumes, definitely a safety issue. We talked at length on Tuesday night with the property owner up on the Mrs. Greco regarding what her concerns would be in that area. Different alternates we looked at there were can you extend Johnson Ave straight out as a T intersection of Route 67? The logical answer to that is no, without some significant retaining walls, excavation, property acquisitions, etc. Is it warranted for that kind of traffic volume? Likely not. The other idea would be to construct what would be a cul-de-sac at the end of Johnson Avenue. Now, city standard cul-de-sac would be 100 foot in diameter. For the vehicles that would come in and out of that area, a little overkill for that particular for that neighborhood. There's other options for people to go. By allowing maintenance and emergency vehicles still access and on some level through this section through here, we could get away from the traditional round cul-de-sac at this location and come up with a hammerhead. As Mrs. Greco identified during the meeting last Tuesday night, is that this is kind of the default activity that occurs today. This is what the area informally, without formal permission, has how people who don't want to go down the Johnson Avenue exit to Route 67, this is kind of how it happens today. This would have an opportunity to formalize that permitted or not permitted access to her driveway, but also have an ability to establish this is primarily an emergency and vehicle maintenance access for the town. Again, this is a little better view of the unsignalized intersection for McDonald's. This sign is a no left turn coming out. There's a sign across the wall that says no left turns coming out of there. It's not obeyed. People use it as they wish. This improvement here is very straightforward. It's to propose an island in here that simply directs and prohibits that left turn movement coming out of that area. There's a signalized entrance just up the road, which should be used for left turn movements coming in and out. A relatively simple improvement in this area. Some minor modifications to the striping to allow the vehicles that do turn left in here have room for vehicles to get by them as they come through, so the vehicle turning left is not blocking the driveway, or they're blocking the through movement for Bank Street. Just a couple of aerial images as we look at the larger area. If we can bring this one up here, Jennifer, for a moment. Now, we don't want to have blinders on and not consider the fact that people use their own patterns of travel through the area. People will find the path of least resistance to get to where they need to get to. We do understand there's other restrictions within the corridor, whether it be school bus activity that occurs in concurrent with different peak hour, rush hours that happen in the corridor. So the intent here would be to improve the operations of the signals, the timings that are coordinated. Some of these signals are coordinated together. These are not necessarily coordinated with these. So we'll be looking into that as part of the final design, is that how do you make sure that this corridor moves efficiently through the area. Again, this is a very brief rundown of what we've looked at in the corridor. The preferred alternates are in your handouts. There's other alternates that we looked at in the area. Again, this is a public outreach process. We're trying to gain input from the public. Tell us what we haven't seen, what we haven't found, what your perspective is on some of these improvements. We'll look at them, we'll incorporate them in the reports, and we'll see where it goes from there. The project right now, like I said, is in a preliminary engineering phase. We've done some budgetary estimates on the different dollar amounts. What the Valley Council of Governments is asked us, Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments has asked us to incorporate is that we've changed the title of the project from a corridor study to a spot improvement study. These improvements, with the intent, have been separated into the different regions, whether it be this section here between Old Drive and River Street, the Johnson Avenue improvements, the Beecher Church improvements, or the Claridus Village. Depending on what funding is available, they didn't want to have a restriction to move forward one of those elements should the funding exist be provided for it. Understanding that under a master plan, you'd love to be able to do them all. If the amount of funding was necessary just to focus on this area, you could still do an improvement to the corridor and the operations by being able to focus and not being locked into, we can't do this because we can't afford all of this. So that's the approach why it's called a spot improvement study as opposed to a corridor study at this time. Currently, like I said, we're in the preliminary engineering phase. as we go through a successful, hopefully, public outreach process. The Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments with DOT will then pursue funding for design, final design, and construction for some element of this study. That could take another couple of years through permitting and design from that, with I believe a projected possible construction of 2019 as a start point for some of this. Keep in mind that there are property acquisitions that would likely have to occur. We've identified that in the report. That usually takes 18 months to 2 years to process through DOT funding. There's relocation assistance that has to happen with property owners who have businesses that are being affected or residents that have to be affected. So that takes a little bit of time to work through that. We work our way through and adjacent to many regulatory areas. We're up against FEMA floodplains. We have 2 rivers here, Naugatuck River and the Little River, that we have to contend with. While we're not working in them, we're working next to them. So there's local wetland permitting. There's other permitting that has to happen. We're going to be doing drainage improvements. Those outlets get near to rivers. We have to make sure those are, we'll be looking at water quality improvements. A lot of these drainage systems probably don't have much water quality elements to them today. So as we start collecting drainage from urban areas, it's our mandate on those efforts now to make sure we try to improve them as best we can so we can improve the outsource discharges. I see some familiar faces here tonight. I'm going to ask so that some of the people who weren't able to come on Tuesday night, they have the privilege to ask any questions first before we go back and revisit some of your questions as well. I'm happy to answer any questions. Like Mark Nielsen from Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments is here too to maybe answer some bigger regional questions that may occur about this corridor. I'm going to put the microphone up here. Feel free to come up and just please introduce yourself, name and address so we can document it for the record. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chet Sabatka. I'm the brother of Rich Sabatka, and he's currently listed as the resident of 111 Bank Street. As well, most of you know here that my brother passed away in March, so I am currently the administrator for his property. So I have grave concerns and issues about what's going to happen to that house on that street, because talking to you, Mike, over the phone a couple times, it sounds like the house is going to disappear. I'd just like to know what your plans are, because I'm in a real tight position with this house, because I've already tried to. It's still sitting in probate because my brother unfortunately has a couple debts that have to be paid off. So I tried to, when I was here 3 weeks ago, I brought in a realtor and just talked to her to see what my options were. And the bottom line was, with the fact that knowing that this was going to happen, we would have to divulge that. And she said it would be probably a hard sell. I did try to put it on the market as is condition as it is right now to do a quick sale, and nothing's happening. It's not moving. So I'm just trying to do justice for my brother. I want to be able to do whatever I have to do, and I'm willing to get rid of that property as quickly as I possibly can, because I live in California. I can't afford to keep coming back and forth. Talking to the realtor, it doesn't make sense for me to try to rent it, because then I would have to hire somebody to manage it. So it'd be a money pit for me. I'd be losing money. So I'm willing to sit down with you folks. If you're willing to come up with funding somehow soon, I'm willing to give you the property as quickly as possible, so at least you get that one off your slate, because to me it would make sense. If you have to get rid of the property, it would make sense to pay for it with $2015 instead of $2019. But that's my dilemma that I'm in. So I'm just looking for some help from you guys, if you can, to try to help me how I can get rid of that property.
Thank you, and I appreciate your travels to come out here and to be here tonight. I know it's not an easy thing to do to be here, so I appreciate your time. Before I ask Mark to maybe answer some larger, funding and bigger pictures from that perspective, as you know, the buildings in the corner were knocked down. There's been some discussion about redevelopment. In the earlier part of the discussions, there was, the hope and the intent that possibly as a consolidated effort here that either the businesses could be either in residences, could be either possibly relocated into some sort of master plan for the area. There's not much moving on that front right now. While the demolition of the buildings is positive improvement as far as at least moving that part forward and making the site more ready for someone to come in and look at it, nothing concrete really is out there right now to say that we can incorporate parking for you and a residence somewhere else on the property. That just hasn't evolved to that point yet. So not having a more concrete answer as far as timeline, as far as when that could be happen, it's something we've known about. We identified it early on, is that there's not a lot of options for not impacting the property. We looked at a few different alternates in the area, and given the constraints not only topographically on the other side with the grade of Martha Street, and trying to widen on that side and cutting that street even steeper, the improvements on the Walgreens side and the need for much larger walls on that side to be able to support the road. At the end of the day, even there, that's not really preserving a what would be considered quote unquote a legal on-street parking area for those residences. They're happening today. Over time, it's just evolved into the way the condition is today. For us to put something back, we have to put it back toward a standard and a code, which would not really support the other initiatives on the corner. So we did look at trying to save it and trying to preserve it, which we've determined it really wasn't feasible. So we understand the condition that the property is in now is regarding the the timing and the kind of the little bit of limbo that you're in with respect to that. Maybe Mark can explain a little bit more about the larger funding process.
Unfortunately, and I hate to begin the answer with that word, as Mike indicated earlier, this is sort of a preliminary engineering feasibility type study. We haven't gotten into design yet. We're hoping to get into design if everyone agrees that we should, advance this project. Because that still hasn't been determined that this is actually a project that's going forward. The state has to agree to fund it. The town has to agree to sort of pursue it. Again, this is part of the public information process. Our hope is that, that it will move forward in some way, shape, or form, and the design could start sometime beginning of next year. As Mike indicated, the design at the best may be a year and a half to complete. This is where your problem really doesn't have much resolution in the short term. This will be a federal aid project, which means the federal transportation dollars will fund 80% of the improvements. State DOT funds will improve or pay for 20%. Because of that, we have to follow very strict federal property acquisition and relocation regulations. And unfortunately, the town cannot buy a property ahead of a project. The feds start questioning, why are you doing that? Is it to avoid some permitting issue or some archaeological or historical regulations that you would have to follow? So would be very difficult for the town to actually acquire the property ahead of a project, even though they may know that it's going to be acquired in the future. So the best that can happen is if the project does move forward and if they start initiating design, one of the parts of that design is developing property right-of-way maps. And once properties are identified that are definitely going to be acquired, the state, again, this will be a state project, they could start the acquisition process. Again, best case scenario is sometime, probably a year from now, unfortunately. I understand the desire. The property is going to be acquired. Let's just, acquire it now, or maybe the value maybe go up in the future, or you have a willing seller. The whole acquisition would be a lot easier. Love to be able to do that. Federal regulations sort of prevent us from actually doing that. But like I said, it's once the process or the project gets into design, we can communicate with DOT to see if the property acquisition process can be expedited in some way, shape, or form. So we'll see. But provide us with your information, contact information, either through Mike. Okay, because what we'll do is again, Mike's developing a contact list, and we'll keep all the abutting property owners apprised of as the project moves forward. And that's unfortunately the best we can offer at this point.
I'm Paul Lopezzo from Trev's Corporation McDonald's. Sorry, I just got this notice hit my desk today, so I wasn't able to make the earlier meeting. But you know, we have concerns about that intersection, and I'm just seeing a little bit of it. You know, I don't know if you could bring that up. I can. Because we're concerned about, you know, just the access of our customers. And you were saying you were putting in an island.
Currently, the state has designed that intersection across the street, no left turn.
Okay,
Coming out of the unsignalized intersection.
sure.
So what it does is it puts that in a solution. People still trying to do it.
Mhm.
Now, it's an issue, but it's hard to
They will.
catch it, they'll catch it.
Mhm.
But technically, it's an illegal maneuver today.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Mhm.
So the proposal would be to guide vehicles so they wouldn't be using that thing. And maybe to see vehicles a little better coming in. One of the issues too, when you get a car that comes out, it keeps out onto
Right.
keep that up. Anybody who would like to make the move in there, once you get blocked, and get stuck on 57,
Yep.
part of this is to be able to say, listen, there should be the ability to come in and make the move into the site itself.
Right.
And the vehicles coming out shouldn't prevent that from happening. You know, the other signalized entrance should be the discharge of the ones that come out. It should be actually easier for them to do that.
Correct. Have you taken into account deliveries, truck deliveries? Because I'll tell you right now how we take our deliveries. This is one of our hardest sites to get into. Got to do it in the middle of the night, but they actually, you know, got a 53-foot tractor trailer, comes down here, makes this left, will run over those signs and anything you put there, comes down because of all the islands in the center. He comes down over here and backs in on the blind side over right alongside the building and unloads there. So
While we've identified the mechanism that we use to do the right traffic,
Mhm.
preliminary engineering, we haven't gone through the design portion of this yet.
Right.
Part of that design process is lay out what the design vehicles are. So while these radii are showing here tiny, those might change.
Right.
And then these islands that are on the site until they're currently would be restricted for some of this, those might have to move as well.
Sure.
So we haven't identified the full limit of the physical impact. There's been a little bit of widening here. You know, while this island is shown as the existing island, that's gone.
Right.
You've got to widen this out a little bit here. There's been some assessment of how you get in and out of the site. Is it final? Absolutely not. Will there be coordination with the property that identifies recognizing that?
Now, are these raised islands out here?
No, it's a striped island.
That's just a striped
What you
island.
see here right now, this is the existing WSL, okay?
Right.
There's not enough width that can be here where we can lie in this side. That center line here is shifted straight up.
Right.
There's more room for a vehicle to sit safely.
Okay. Good.
The vehicles would have to, happens, I don't think it really changes the ability to mount here from the tunnel. What it does do is that the side slopes and the concern about how close it is to the line,
Right.
should be improved.
Is there going to be, is there a road widening there
There is
at that point?
widening in this section.
No.
The intent here is to
I see the,
here's your current radius
yeah,
with a very tight turn.
right.
Which like you see the views are probably further out if it's driveway in the this is a new radius. I'd have to check to see if the new thing is used to the gravel section. Again, if you're going to try to trail, you don't want to track trails.
Sure.
So this would be an improvement over the current condition. Anything else?
We're going to have to relocate our road sign, right? It's right there, right here.
A little bit further back.
It is back?
This is the means we're cutting this corner off here.
It'll be right there. You know, so now you make it wider. People are going to, you know, along with trucks and everything else going out there, it's going to be close.
I would say, I would be cautious when say making it wider, because while the island is going to be
Mhm.
while the radius is, it provides more accommodation for the turning. We're not opening the throat out of this area, we're actually confining it here. So
Okay.
we can follow this path out and not be in a position where this becomes an attractive option.
Is it going to create any kind of variances for signage?
I think Russo, we're not changing property lines.
Okay. Mhm. Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong, when they do the design of the project, I mean, they'll check to see if the project does create a non-conforming use or a situation where no longer very
Compliant, right.
complying with regulation. And they'll address that and ensure that everything, you're in full compliance. They don't want to create either a hazardous situation, because if the sign is too close to that, then
Mhm.
you have now an object or a hazard within your cover. They'll address
Sure.
that and make sure that it's
It'd be a real good thing if you didn't put that island in there. If you didn't put the
so
island.
again, the intent,
Striping is great.
right, the cars will, if the intent is to prevent left turns out,
Mhm.
and that's the only movement that they're talking about prohibiting, you need an island, because if it's just paint, they're going to drive right over it.
You're going to drive over it, but they're going to drive over that too and then have damage to their vehicles.
Well, that's
Because it happens all the time. It happens all, I've seen it done a million times. We had a similar situation, and it just, cars just, they tear out their oil pans, they do all kinds of stuff, and then it becomes your responsibility. You know, they say, you put that there, you know.
Just to understand the options when you talk about diverting traffic or absolutely. Regarding the island, we've seen many times, you can do a mountable island that still deters a left-hand turn movement. It makes it uncomfortable for someone to take that left-hand turn. It can still restrict it. It can still modify it. But if there's a need for, because of restrictions on the site, for that to be mountable, or elements of it to be mountable, so that the trucks who come in and out can still roll over it without scraping and that kind of thing, that we've done that before too. So again, that's something, the final design of what that looks like, it needs to balance the needs of the site with the safety that's trying to be achieved through that improvement. We've got some more questions you guys would like to ask. Anyone else? Sir, any questions?
Stanley Jakimowski. I own the building on the corner of Bank and Franklin Street. I think what you're doing is great. It's like the forgotten side of town. And And the biggest violators of parking there are the tenants. You know, the 2 spaces there. At first I thought it was a good idea, but I'd rather see this. Pardon? Well, there is the parking lot on the side of the Chinese restaurant there, which is a town parking lot.
It's convenient that actually is there. In some cases, the people across the street don't have that luxury of having that parking lot and that proximity.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Thank you.
Want to introduce in the record, I'm not going to go through this as a recap of the night. So basically, my name is John Borgazell, the Russian American Club. Russian American Club was first from Seymour Trust in 1935. In 1938, the Russian Club became the Russian Club. So we donate to various charities and organizations. I don't really need this. Oh, for the damn. Various organizations, through the town of Seymour. Without that parking area / delivery area that we were led to believe that were ours since we bought the property. We've maintained that property since 1938. Also, if you remove that property that we thought was ours from us, we might as well just fold up shop tomorrow and leave the building to the town. Because without getting deliveries there and some parking, we'll be out of business in months or within a year of you guys removing that area. But like I said, most of that's in the record already from the week before. Then I just added some additional comments that we talked about the night before.
Thank you. You also, at the time, had mentioned that you had a survey possibly that would show something different than what the town's mapping would indicate for your ownership limits. Yeah.
Right. Well, the odd thing is if I go through what town has versus, so I found this. Excuse me. This was from 1956. Now, why we weren't named as the owners of this area here in 1956, I don't know. The flood of 55 maybe flushed the map down the toilet. I don't know. But the H.A. Matthews Company used to own all this property here where Allen's Plumbing is today and the sponge rubber or specialty plant that burned down a few years ago. So just from what I can see here, it says H.A. Matthews Company here. This is the radius. This is the storm drain. This looks like the property line. I may be wrong. I'm just going back in archival paperwork. But I did find another piece of paper that has the dotted line going across here. So there's a radius here. You guys are the map people. I work in Sikorsky, so there's a different story. But this line here is the radius at the bottom of the hill. What this means, this corner here, I don't know. But like I said, and we tarred that property, we shovel it, we plow it, and we cut the grass on the island since 1938. So I know that we can't, quitclaim deed that property because we don't know who owns it. We don't know who owns the island. Do you? Oh, really? Okay, so is that H.A. Matthews, right? That's who owned it before? Oh, okay. So you own the island? Okay. So, Yeah. So, so how about the driveway there?
Sorry. Alex Budzinski, Housatonic Wire. I don't have the map in front of me. I know that the triangle is a parcel on our deed. I don't know about the driveway. You know, it's so many, it's a triangle, so it's like so many feet by so many feet. What do I care about that piece of land up there? Me personally, it doesn't matter. To you, it's valuable, but I can't tell you about the driveway. But I could, if you want to check with me, I'll check on my maps and on the parcel. Actually, give me your name and so on, and then I'll give you that page of the deed so you could actually see what it is. How's that sound? Yeah, I will be here Monday. Shh, shh. They didn't hear that. I'll bring that Monday.
Thank you.
Mark Solanch, Pershing Avenue, also from the Russian Club. I just find it a little difficult to see that Church Street being cut short a little bit and saying that it's too steep to go straight out to Route 67. I find it difficult to see that shortening it won't actually steeper and putting a left-hand turn at the bottom during the winter. To have people stabbing their brakes to come to a halt and having their turn to the left. My 66 years old, and I've been driving for a while, just doesn't make sense to me.
Part of what, as you know, Beecher Street starts to raise quickly in elevation from here as it works its way up the hill. Right now, Church Street intersects down at the lower portion of it. As we work our way and move the intersection up, you're tying in at a higher elevation than the current road ties into today. So this is this extra foot or so, that change in grade there, a little bit more, I think, you'll find that this allows us, as Church Street comes down and tries to get a landing today at the intersection, it starts to come up. You raise the elevation, you actually start to create a landing of the area as opposed to just a direct connection into the intersection itself. Again, we're not in the full design of that yet. We would vet out those issues, make sure that the curvature of this meets the right requirements, that it's a safe transition as you come through the area. Again, this is the conceptual stage of what we could possibly do in this area. The distance it would take for this to get back to here, if we wanted to come in to tee that up by itself, is this starts to move away. This distance becomes shorter. You shorten the distance and you drop the elevation to 67 a little bit, and it just gets steeper. And then there's also the impacts it would create to this particular part of Allen's plumbing supply as well. There's some impacts on that along the edge there that you would have to. There's a wall that supports their back area here, right up against Church Street here. So anything going that way is quite a severe impact on that particular area. And again, we're not in a mode here, and let me make sure I'm clear, of suggesting that we're eliminating the parking completely. If there's the ability for us to rework the area into a configuration that supports how you use it today, that's something we've put this together and honestly in a bit of a vacuum, when it comes to what you particularly need and your needs. So if you go back to the conceptual for a minute, Jennifer. When we look at this site, I drove through the area again since our meeting. The topography on the edge of that pavement on Beecher Street goes straight up, as you know. There's a lot of vegetation along that side. Are there opportunities to make modifications to that? Are there opportunities for possibly pulling in some parallel parking along the road by pulling off some vegetation and some slope, maybe some walls, possibly, depending on how this area through here we've created back as more of a green space. There could be possibly another similar cut through that's there today that looks less like a town road, more like an area that you use. I think what is right now it tends to be, I think, more than just you use it to get through the area. People tend to cut through and then use it. So if we preserve it as more of a parking area, you maybe change the surface of it possibly, you do little differences here and there, and it becomes more clear that it's a parking area as opposed to maybe another cut through for people to get to Church Street or back to Beecher Street really from that area, then that's an option as well.
Yeah, for many years, the prior presidents told us, so, and Mark and other members, that's our parking lot. Why are people parking there? Put up no trespassing signs. So we really thought it was ours. We chastised people. We chased them out of the, people would park there. And, the Budweiser truck comes around that corner and delivers, and if there's cars there, the Budweiser truck keeps going up the road and says, we'll see you in the next. It is. But like I said, we've been maintaining it forever, the tar section, and I talked to an older member today. He said, as far as he knows, we paved it, and we've been maintaining it. And we've been plowing it, and so on and so forth.
Part of the focus of this improvement was to improve how the vehicles exit out onto 67. Like I said, that we heard it anecdotally the other night about once somebody comes down here, if you're you're taking that left-hand turn and you haven't given enough room, you can't get right. You've blocked the traffic because of the left-hand turn now. It's difficult now. It's only going to get more difficult. We understand that. They're not putting a signal in here as part of it. That right-hand turn, there's options to go up to West Street, out to 67 other ways. Those paths exist. It's really the one or two vehicles that tends to go this way, once take a left, that could stop it for everybody else coming down Church. Again, we're in the, like I said, this is why we're having this meeting. We're in preliminary engineering. This is not final design.
Greg Omochenko, Russian American Club. Where the fire hydrant is, if you move the fire hydrant and just take it out a little bit to make that where that stop sign is, just move everything to the right a little bit, and you could fit 2 lanes because 2 cars do fit there right now.
Comments on Tuesday? We'll hear them again tonight, and again, it's part of our investigation. Can you spell your last name for me, please? Okay, oh. Thank you.
Question, are you going to put another lane in where Seymour Lumber sidewalk is? Are you going to remove that sidewalk, or are you going to add a lane there as you come down and then make the right in onto River Street? Would be, excuse me, looking right through here. Is that going to add a lane where it is right now, or are you just going to improve the sidewalk?
We're improving the right turn lane. So if we look at the, let's go to the next one here. So you have this. So here's our current condition here. You've got essentially a little slip by, for people. A lot of people do it's to two through lane movements there. What happens there is that the people who want to take the right-hand turn can't have to wait for that through movement to clear. So while we're not adding a separate new lane for that right turn, we're making the queue for that a little longer so that you can get into that lane. Yeah. A little bit out, so the vehicles can actually get over there and get over to the turn itself. Some of the timing improvements that are happening here as well are going to improve that. the length of time that a vehicle has to wait for that to turn. So the more we can shorten the queue in this area, the better. When I say queue, it's the stacking of vehicles behind the stop bar, and how long it takes for someone to get to a position where they can then take the right-hand turn. Yes. Yep. Sure. Absolutely. To focus in this, Jen, just go up to the photos showing the pictures. We're going to be back before the intersection view. So let's start up at the bridge, up at where they're doing the sidewalk, cantilevered sidewalk improvements off the bridge on the downstream side, on the southern side. We're going to pick up where they've left off with those improvements with the sidewalk. There's no real widening. The widening starts to begin there, so we can establish what will be a 4-lane section just west of the Walgreens driveway. And that extra lane that's being added is to allow that that Old Drive movement to stay in that lane and come all the way through and go up toward Rimmon. In doing that, we're going to properly protect those areas. We're going to have it's still one through lane that comes through this way. We're receiving that. Part of that improvement does shift the edge of pavement this way a touch. When we establish the lane arrangement at Martha and across from Walgreens where the sidewalk is narrow today, we are creating a 5-foot walk. And the introduction of the 5-foot bike lane, or shoulder, in that area, plus 11-foot lanes into that area, we are moving back about a sidewalk width, about a 5-foot widening of the pavement along the entire frontage of the south side of Bank Street. So what that does is that if you look at 5 feet back from the edge of pavement, that puts the edge of pavement roughly right about where that seam is here. So some of those areas, that's right about where the porch and some of those steps walk out into the area. Because of that, you can't have that. You just can't have that condition where people are. It would remove the ability to put in the parking area that you have today, which is fairly informal. It's there. It's been used for those areas. A lot of times you've got vans that park actually right on the sidewalk there. You'd lose that space for that ability. So without anything in the back of the properties, you got drop-offs in those areas to be able to replace that parking somewhere else. We're very limited as far as what we can do. If any options at all are very difficult. You have a couple spots where I think the sidewalk or the stairs come right down to the edge, maybe even past the front edge of the porch, which would be into basically the edge of pavement. You'd be stepping people right out into the roadway. We can't propose that. We can't recommend that. We looked at, hey, what do we do? Can we take the porches off? Can we take the porches off the buildings in those areas and do something different? No, we can't. I mean, those are the options. The emergency access and accessibility to the second floor has to be maintained. Once you start getting into modifying buildings to that extent, the benefit of doing that, well, what are they left with? One of the things we try to focus on in these projects, and DOT uses a term called context-sensitive design, is that, yes, there's an engineering solution to do any one of these things that we can do. But at the end of the day, what have we left? What condition have we left for people to live with and experience at the end of the day? That's not a type of condition we want to leave for people in a residential condition. In a business condition, either. It's not safe. It doesn't really support the type of use that they had before. If we're not improving it for them, if we're making it worse, it can't be a recommendation that as an engineer that I'm comfortable making for a project. So again, as we work our way down, that edge of pavement and the need to continue a sidewalk in that area, it comes right through all the porches that are in that area. Again, prior to the buildings being demolished, there was bigger building impacts as you got to the corner, as we started to widen. The biggest widening is actually where the building was demolished. So prior to those being demolished, this report had the recommendation of partial acquisitions as well and building demolition as part of it. Again, some of that's occurred. There's still partial acquisitions necessary there, where in this area through here, we're recommending or suggesting that full property acquisitions are required, where the balance of this property could still be worked. The balance of these properties, unless they're tied to another plan, they're going to be difficult to rework in some way that's feasible. So we really have to be honest and say, this impact is a permanent impact that really limits what this property can be in the future. Could it then be absorbed into another larger development piece? Probably, at some point in time. But until some plan comes together, right now, these impacts are extensive. The way these projects work, and Mark can clarify, is that so when they go through the acquisition process, and he spoke about the Uniform Relocation Assistance Act, which guides all the acquisitions, the federal law that guides the acquisitions and the relocations of property owners and businesses. So when they go to construction, they'll go to and acquire these parcels. These parcels will temporarily be in the town, in the state of Connecticut's name. They'll be owned by the state of Connecticut once they acquire them. How they dispose of that property later on is another phase of that. So what they'll do is that they'll say, I'm going to take this property, it's an acre, whatever, just for numbers' sake. We only need, a quarter of that for it. So that's the minimum right-of-way we need to support Route 67. The rest of it becomes an excess area disposal, and they can offer it to the town as possible properties. I believe that's the process where they would offer it to the town and transfer it. I don't know how that works, financially, or what's the mechanism for that, because the town has already participated on some level, I think, on some of the right-of-way costs for that. But as far as the disposition of that land, the state really has no benefit to hold on to it, so it really usually goes back to the town. Again, that would be clarified once we got into final design and the DOT got involved with the actual acquisitions. But yes, I mean, after that, the town could then pursue rezoning it. They could pursue all kinds of different things. We did a project in Waterbury where they took 20 residential houses because of the widening that was over there. And then those areas were rezoned after the fact to make sure it was more consistent with the corridor's uses that are adjacent to it. So those become commercial properties where they were old, antiquated residential developments in the past. What happens from there? That's up to whatever developer may want to come in. The town could put it up for auction or put it up for sale as a potential development piece. They could be possibly combined with other parcels here. You could have potential retail frontage back on the street here again, as long as it had a connected parking situation in the back that could support that. That could happen. And that ideally, when this first started, we thought if there was any steam moving forward with respect to redevelopment of this piece here, is that maybe that was an option for reconstruction of these parcels in some manner that would support either keeping the property owners re-involved in the job for some period of time. But again, without anything concrete on that, there's really nothing we can say that is really feasible at this time.
And just to follow up on that as well, we usually keep a 30-day open window for receiving comments. So if you can't make it on Monday night, you'll still have 30 days after that to get us any comments. We just ask you to provide it in writing or through an email, and we'll incorporate those into the report. So it's not necessary to be here on Monday. So you do have an opportunity to continue make comments.
Without any further questions, again, we thank you for coming tonight. Hopefully this was informative for you and answered some questions. Thank you for your time. This has been helpful for us.